name is Antoinette and I'm a programming librarian here at the Mandel Public Library. I'm going to be teaching you how to paint miniatures in a basic style of fashion today. We'll go over what washing is, how to do an overall start of painting a miniature, and how to do a little bit of the fun detail effects. So without further ado, we're going to get started. So we have our paladin here, and my goal is to make it look like it's a paladin with the oath from the sea, which for people who do not know what that is, that's basically meaning it draws its healing magic and its powers from the sea and the water. Now with this, it is a tiny one, so we're going to be using a lot of the tiny brushes, but first I'm using a 1/8 brush just so that I can do a wash over it. For the wash, I am not using the folk art paint. I am using a dark stone from the Army Painter War Paints just because it is very liquidy. With it being very liquidy, I'm able to get the into the nooks and crannies. And I'm washing this first with just the dark stone because I want to make sure it'll be able to pop afterwards. So with miniatures, you want to paint it like putting on clothing. So first you want to do the skin, then the shirt, then if you have a vest, and so forth. So with this one, we do not really have much skin besides the hands. But because of that, I am just going to use a dark stone just so that we can do an accent of the highlights first. And that's my method, just to make sure that it has depth as we layer it on. Painting, no matter what medium, comes with a lot of layers. And layering is always fun to do. And it makes me think of since we have that Happy Little Paintings program with Bob Ross, it really helps actuate that you should be doing back and then coming forth, because as you layer, it becomes more dimensional. May say with a miniature, you don't need that much dimension because it's already there, but the more detail you put into it and the more you think about what you really want to do with your miniature, it's going to come out really well. So as you see, I'm not trying to get all of it. I'm trying to just go into all the crannies that I can get into, and this way I'll make whatever I paint over it a little darker. And from there, it'll be almost like either staining, because we all know you do start off with a good pair of armor, but that can go completely the other way eventually, especially when you're out there battling. So things will get darker, it'll have some staining along it, and I'll probably even put a little bit of aging on this one, or like some sea damage later on. First, we're just kind of getting in there, getting into some nooks and crannies. Like I said, I'm not trying to cover all of it. I'm just trying to give it a nice little basis to give it a dimension before we get into the full run of things. This miniature, believe it or not, I actually got from a bath bomb. They have bath bombs out there that are like D20 related, and you either get a dice or a miniature. I got a miniature. I was not mad about that. So we have our wash on our feature. Kind of looks like this guy went and played in the mud just a little bit. So with that, you see that it's going to probably give us a little bit of darker dimensions there. Alright, so for the hands, what I'm going to do is I'm grabbing a little bit of Apple Orchard, because my paladin is actually a sea elf. And so we're just going to gently get in there. with this one, we're not really too worried about getting it on anything else because we are working from skin to top. And this helps us get into the little nooks and crannies that we want to get into. I picked a sea elf because I've always wanted to try a sea elf. And with that, it's always interesting to just kind of bring things out. I am using the folk art paint. We'll be using a mix of the metallics, enamel, and just regular acrylic paints. Just getting in there, making sure I get all the coloring in there, but also try not to lose the integrity of the details. So you don't want to go too thick on these. If you go a little thick, you can always wipe off your brush and take a little bit off of it. Just making sure we're getting in there in all the little areas. There we go. What I'm also going to do, even though you can't really see much of his neck, I am going to kind of go in there. What I'm going to do is just go straight down with it and then pull it up. Down and up. Down and up. Just in case, you know, as we paint into it, that it doesn't pull or anything. We make sure all that back is covered in armor so we don't have to worry about it. But I feel like the neck part was exposed a little bit. With miniature painting, especially ones of these sizes, I usually pour the paint as I go, just because I don't know how much or how little I will need them. So what we're going to do is do the basic color of the armor first, and then we will dive more into the details that we want to give to it. The armor color is going to go all over except for the sword part and the shield, because those are going to be different colors. And so I'm going to go pour my paint for the armor, and then we'll get started. So for the armor, I'm using a metallic folk art, and it's the ice blue. I choose ice blue because I wanted it to look like the sea, since we are doing an oath, the Oath of the Sea Paladin. And so what I'm going to do is just go over all of the armor. What I like about folk art metallic paints is, one, they're shiny, and so it helps with the effect of the armor, but also they're not thick. It's almost like the wash that we did with the brown, and the washes can come in different colors as well, but as we go through this, you'll see just how the effect of the wash is going to work along with everything. It's kind of making it look a little bit more silvery, but I kind of like that because this blue is really popping blue. And with the popping blue, we don't want our paladin here to look too exposed out there. Like I said, we're doing all of the armor except for the shield and the sword, because those are going to have a different underlay of what they're using. If any of you play D&D or any other tabletop RPGs, go ahead and drop what your favorite race and class is to play, and if you've ever done any of the miniature painting. Just kind of getting all over in there. Try not to pull too much of the green down, but as you saw, some of the green did get on this, but that's okay, because it gives it a little bit of a cohesive feeling to the whole layout. Gives a little bit of a under the sea feel to it. What I'm probably going to do with this is make sure we get 2 good coats of this paint on the armor, just because that way it will hold up on detail, and then we'll let it dry and we'll come back and do some detail. I'll give you some tricks on how to do that. So we've already kind of started the beat up process of the look, but I also want it to look aged. And there's a fun way we can get the age factor. Practice makes perfect, not takes perfect. And along those lines, you're just getting down to the nitty-gritty of everything. I love painting my miniatures. It helps give it character, and it makes the character your own. Just getting the back. I'm using a number 2 flat brush, just so that, because it is angled enough on there, that it can get into the areas that I want it to get into. So we have our first coating done. I'm going to work on a second coat for it, and then we're going to let it dry, and then we're going to do the sword and the shield base colors. Alright, so we did a second coat on the armor, and we got into all the sections that are here. It's looking really awesome. I'm liking how the details are coming out because we did use a wash beforehand, and the wash is just something that will help the paint stick a little bit more in those areas, but it gave it the shadows and a little bit of a start of the aging effect. So now what we're going to do is do our main coat on the shield and the sword. So we're going to get started. We're going to use the same brush as we did before. So it's the number 2 flat brush that I'm using. I don't want it to be too metallic right now. We're just using a steel gray. So we're going to go ahead and start with the shield. And with the shield, you notice that the wash picked up on a lot of the detail, which I like. And we're just going to go over it with the gray. The gray is a lighter gray. I did a lighter color for it because the wash was so prominent on it, and for the details later on, I didn't want it to be too dark and cover up those assets. For everyone watching at home, what is your favorite thing to paint? I'll say mine has to be miniatures. It really gets me in the zone and helps me to not focus on anything else because there's so many little details to do. But also I like painting ceramics. That's what my sister and I would get together and do at times. You can see we covered up the shield, and you can still see that shadowy effect from the wash. And we're gonna flip them on over so that we can work on the sword. And we're getting in there. Being very careful of the hands, because I don't want the hands to be gray, but I can always repaint that. To make sure I'm getting into the hilt of the sword as well as the length of it, just to make sure that when I go back with the detail colors I'm going to be doing, that it'll all have a similar thing to it. So we're going to flip them the other way and make sure we give the same quality of effect to both sides. I'm going to go under there and just kind of pull up. For anything that's a little bit in a tighter situation, this one's not too tight, it's just in an awkward position. I try just to go all the way down and pull upward. We're going to make sure we get that little area very carefully. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and get on in here and just kind of pull. I did get a little bit of the blue in there, but since it is a CO Paladin, I am going to be adding in some effects of kind of the sea and all the colors kind of mixed together. Taking that in there. And then just like I had said before, this one is a little bit of a tighter situation. So we're going to go in and then pull down. You don't want to try and paint upward too much because that's when you may get something. But always make sure that your brush is on contact with those tight areas, because that way you're able to make sure that that is where you're painting. So I kind of will go up and down, up and down. Almost like painting a wall. Up and down, up and down. And there we go. So I'm going to do a second coat on that, and then we'll start on some of the finer details. Alright, so far we have our wash on it, 2 coats on the armor, and 2 coats on the sword and the shield. And then now what we're going to do, start working on the details. I like working on miniatures like this, when they have a sword and a shield, to do their details first, because it's a part where you're going to be grabbing a lot when you're trying to get to like the armor part. So with that being said, we're going to grab our color. We're using Antique Gold, which is another metallic, and we're going to do a little outlining of it. I'm going to pick it up and bring it kind of towards you. Now sometimes with the details I don't do a second coat, because if you do a second coat on the details it could become too thick and you lose the integrity of it. So I'm just adding some gold up in here. Grabbing a little. Just going very nicely. Being careful. What I like about flat brushes are they have the edges and you can turn it sideways to get a little bit skinnier, so that way you can get into those details. I'm just gonna go on top, because when you're in a role-playing game a lot of people look down on it and you want to make sure all of that's done. Go ahead and do the side. What I'm doing is staying straight and then just going up. I'm not siding on either side because I could catch the hand. So I'm just going being very straight about it. I don't have a gadget like what I'm about to tell you, but there are ones that you can actually put on the base of the models and they'll hold it while you have more flexibility of turning it. Makes it a little bit easier, but I never got one, so I do it the old-fashioned way. And then go ahead and go down this area. Just kind of going up to the part and just being very slight about it, kind of just kissing on the miniature, so that way if I do make a mistake it could be easily scraped off with the edge of the brush or your nail, or wiped off. So we're going to do it again on this side, so just kissing it light and kind of quick. I don't do it slow because then my hand becomes less steady, but if you find that you're slow and steady works for you, then by all means do it. I just know with my hand's way of doing things it gets kind of difficult, and I kind of like to give it a once over, make sure I didn't miss any of the spots of the first spot I'm working on, so that way I don't have to backtrack too much. So there's that outline. And what I'm also going to do, I want to pick up a little bit of the citrus green. I want to take on a little bit of the details that I want to have a little bit of a green, since it is a sea elf and I'm pulling from the Oath of the Sea. I'm going to make sure I'm representing all the colors that I want to be showcased. And we're going to go ahead and go this part. That side notion to make sure I'm getting where I want to go with it. mimicking as much as possible what I'm doing. And I noticed I got a little bit on the gold, but I am going to go back and I'm putting more gold within this anyways, so we can go back and fix those happy little accidents. I'm also going to pull in some of that ice blue from the armor. Gonna make it a little matchy-matchy, and we're gonna put it right here, bringing in those colors together. Just kind of kissing it, like I was saying, going in, dabbing it, and kissing. And that way, if there are some of the mistakes like that, what I'm gonna do, got a little off course there, I'm gonna take my nail, just kind of go in there and work at just pulling it off very lightly so I don't pull off the other one. And it's cleaned it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is clean my brush again and just kind of hit some of the gold that got hit. Sometimes it looks good because you have a little bit of a almost like a ding in the shield, and it really makes it look pretty effective. And I will say I'm not going to do a second coat on the shield because I like how it looks, and I want it to not be too much of a pop out there. We're going to add in some other layers in a second. For now though, we're going to move on to the hilt of the sword. The hilt of the sword we're going to pull in from the gold again. I'm going to pick them up by its legs. And we're going to start pulling in from the hilt areas that we want to. Even when I do coloring books or other types of painting, I try and limit myself to a certain amount of colors. Just that way it has the cohesiveness of everything running together. And just like before, we're just kind of kissing it, going along. And turn it over. Do the same on the back. And there's some details on the sword that are finer, and that's what we'll do in the next little step. Making sure we're getting in there. There we go. So all I'm doing with the sword right now is giving it a gold hilt, because other layers are going to be coming in after that. Gonna let that dry for a second, and then we'll come back and finish it up. Okay, so we're going to work on giving some fine details to the armor. Now what I'm going to do for the first part is I want to make it look, we're going to work on the little cloth area here first, and then also on the back. And then what we're going to do for the rest of it is give it a little aged look. So for the colors of the cloth, we're going to pull in from the gold and the green again, staying consistent with my color palette all the way through. So we're going to come up, and for this one, because of such the fine detail in the smaller area than it is on the shield, we're going to go ahead and first just cover the whole area gold. So just like we had stated before, you work on the skin or with that under layers, and then you'll be pulling it out. What I'm making sure is that it's not heavy. I'm pulling out any of the heavy stuff and coming down with it. So that way it gives it a little bit of effect. It'll have the blue kind of underlining it as a shadow, so that way it'll still stay cohesive to everything. Just pull some of that downward and just make it all there. There we go. And then what we're going to do is clean our brush. And what did we learn? blot it to make sure it doesn't run. And what I'm going to do is take a little bit of the silver we used, not the silver, it is the gray, and we're going to come up and work on the blade hilt here. We're just going to give that the gray to match with everything else that's going on. We're pulling from the citrus green to be the pack that's holding the dagger. And it looks like he has two sleeved daggers along the sides that kind of go around him. So we're also going to give those the grayish coloring and then the green. Triple the gray. Throw again. We're going to get in there and do the little hilt here. Now I just noticed that it was too thick of a paint because it's going to be very close. So keep aware of everything and just dab and kiss like we did before. Do it again with here. Dab and kiss. And then on the back we'll give that the green like on the other side that we're going to do. So another bit of a dab and kiss there. Come up to the front. Dab and kiss. And then dab and kiss there. And then try very carefully to get inside this one. So again, I have my hand on my other hand here to steady it as we go in to go try and grab this one without getting it on the armor. And I just dabbed it and I'm going to leave it there. There's that aspect. We're going to go back now to the front and we're going to take the silver, the gray, and bring that more into the details here and just kind of give it a little bit of the finer look there. And there we go. So what I'm also going to do is take the gold that we did from this part and tilt the guy up a little bit and get within a little nook and cranny here. I'm going to work on that since I can't really get that as a good view on the camera, and then I'm going to show you an aging effect that we're going to do on the armor, like a added one. So I'll be back. So we're actually going to go back to the brush that we used to do the wash. It's been sitting in water and I'm going to dab it on my plate here for a second just to get some of that wash color out, but I'm going to keep it wet. I know before we had issues, but I'm grabbing a rose gold because I want it to look like it's been in the water. You know how things kind of get that brassy water effect to it. We're going to make sure it's wet enough to pull and almost make the paint now a watercolor. As we do kind of a secondary wash, I'm doing very lightly along it. Just that way it doesn't take away from the blue. Finger on there. And I'm only going to reapply if necessary and just try and use what's on my brush and make this kind of a cohesive kind of weathering and a water type of feel to it. It's basically by a little bit of the water. I had to reapply and just kind of going along to make it that weathered effect, or weathered in just the sea itself. Sea is a vicious mistress. We're going to make sure we follow it through on the back and being very careful of the other places that are still drying at the moment. And we're just going to pull this all together along the side. Go up. What do we say in this tight spot? We just go up. We put our paint on there and just kind of go upward, making sure it's all still connected. Make sure we do the top of this area. that sea effect to it. Chose rose gold because it's kind of a bronze, but also it still has a nice coloring to blend with everything else. I'm also going to take some more of that and work it along the shield very lightly. Just kissing the little sections that are there. Let's bring it all together. The same we're going to do for the sword. Just one brush up on both areas. And it looks like I didn't have any paint on there. So up and over. So doing the base is totally optional. You can make it any type you want. But that are my tips and tricks for doing a miniature. I think our paladin looks really great. If you liked my quick tips for the miniatures, just let me know down in the comments below, and we may do some more in-depth miniature one later on. Have a great day. Bye.